So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Ollie. I'm the commercial director for White Trees. This is quite an exciting opportunity for me. So I'm sort of poacher come gamekeeper. I've spent many years local authority and central government side of the fence, and now to be part of an organisation like White Trees is just really fantastic. So I guess the opportunity to sit down with you, Si, and sort of learn a bit more about you and just have that conversation over the next few minutes is a really exciting one to do, and to learn about your journey, but also the really exciting opportunity to launch our new therapeutic offer as White Trees. I'd just like to learn a bit more about that. Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So for you, why did you create White Trees? What was your inspiration?
I think the main inspiration, I think, goes back to my childhood. And I don't think it's necessarily just being in care. I think my story is a bit before that. So my dad was a foster carer, my mum were foster carers. He was a Church of England vicar. I was a middle child, the foster children that lived with us. There was always between 2 and 4. I had a massive bedroom in a vicarage, and I was basically living with foster kids from I don't know, 4, 6 years old. And then my dad died, committed suicide. And I was, as I said, I was a middle child. My older brothers were both working. Sisters were too young to kind of experience it. I went completely off the rails for lots of different reasons. And I ended up getting put in care. And my first care experience was horrible. I got moved back to an area that I'd formerly lived with my family. And so it had amazing memories. And then I got put there in a very unfortunate circumstance at a very young age. I think I had a little bit of global developmental delay, so I think I was a bit younger than my years. So I was 13, but I think I was probably 11 going on 13, if you see what I mean. So, or 13 going on 11. So I was a bit younger than my years, and I was a white boy, and I got put in a home with quite a few gang kids, all Jamaican, lovely kids, got on really well with them, but felt like I was always on the back foot. Being a vicar's son, I was always very tough as a kid, in a sense of I could climb a tree, fall out, I wouldn't cry, but I never had this kind of violent nature in me at all. And I think the first home I moved into, because of the dynamics of the home, sharing bedrooms with kids that you don't know that have come from gangs, kids that have had their fingers chopped off by their parents because they've stolen, or and all of these stories. I wasn't that kid. It was very different for me. My journey was probably equally as terrible up to that point, but not the same. And I think that being thrust into that home, I mean, I ran away, just one story, I ran away from that home, and I went to live with an older guy who promised me that he would, help me earn money. My whole life's been about trying to earn money to escape. And so I went to central Bristol. He had me stealing cars, he had me burgling houses, he used to get me to crawl, I was quite small, and he used to get me to crawl through windows, and we did that every night. Even though he promised me somewhere to stay, he never really gave me anywhere to stay. I slept in the back of a stolen car, or I slept on in a conservatory at somebody's house where he was staying. So I was kind of more treated like a dog than I was a human. And that went on for about 5 or 6 months, and then I had enough, and I walked off, and there was a whole different story there, but I went to live on the streets, and I lived on the streets for 3 weeks, and it was coming around to winter time. It was really hard. It was very scary, and I went back to the home, and when I went back to the home, they didn't even know who I was. They had no clue who I was. I wasn't actually allowed in, so I knocked on the door. I was this little lad, cold sores all over my mouth. I was in a proper pickle, and no one could let me in because they weren't allowed to, because they didn't know who I was. I'd been given a key worker, and I'd never even met my key worker. She was off sick when I arrived. She was still off sick when I came back. So they didn't. No one in the home could be phoned to even know who I was. So eventually I was allowed in, and I was only allowed into one room. And I remember it wasn't a living room, but they had this like area for families or whatever it was called. I don't know what it's called. And I just sat there, and all I wanted was a bath to go to bed. That was all I wanted, and I didn't have that for quite a long time. I was waiting and waiting and waiting, wondering what they were going to do with me, what these adults were going to do with me, thinking, well, why am I even here, but not wanting to go back outside, because outside is now scarier than inside, because I'm inside. And I think that little boy in that journey, in that home, I mean, there were some amazing people in that home. I'm going to say that if anybody listens to this that worked in that home at that time, there were some really good people. But institutionally, the home was wrong. It was set up wrong. Those people couldn't do their job properly. They weren't able to do their job properly, and they probably had it slightly wrong with me. They were trying to treat me like everybody else, and I wasn't everybody else. I was me. And people in that period in my life would say things to me like, "You're going to go to prison. You're going to do this. You're going to do that." We were stealing cars, bringing them back to the children's home, parking them on the drive. You know, we were completely out of control. And that was me just trying to keep up with the other kids. That was me trying to be brave. That was me trying to be the one that's not going to be bullied, that's not going to be a victim. And, you know, in that period, one of the ladies that worked there, I was having an argument, and I said to her, well, one day I'm going to do this job and I'm going to do it better than you. It's obviously a lot of swearing. And she said, you're never going to be able to do this. You're never going to be able to work in care. You know, no one's going to employ you. You've been arrested so many times now already. I lost my driving licence at 13 and a half, and I got it back at 15. It completely bamboozles me that I was banned from driving whilst I was, in definition, banned from driving. That bamboozles me. But no one, and I said this when Queenie asked me the question earlier, it's about future and purpose. And I think at that point, that little boy was put into a box and was there for a long time. So to answer your question, I think that's where this was born. And I think it was locked away for a long time. And there's been elements of people unlocking that door along the way. But there was a lot of locks.
Yeah.
And as they unlocked, that's what happened. And it just was a natural progression into something I didn't expect.
And I suppose that was going to take me on to the next point. That statement of "you'll never do this." Did you imagine back then that it would ever be what White Trees is now, and the journey that White Trees is on?
Do you know what? I've always been very, very good at dreaming. And I think it's a bit of a superpower. So when I was really young, I'd sit in a classroom daydreaming. It's all over my reports. I think there's a lot of kids like that. But I think you can dream stuff. You can think about stuff, and you can imagine stuff in your brain, and you can make yourself feel good with those dreams. So I did dream it. I did imagine it, but I didn't believe it. I never thought this would be my life. I actually never even thought I would have a driving licence. I never thought I'd be married. I never thought I'd go to a nice restaurant. I'd never thought I'd stay in nice hotels. I had a little taster of what that life was like when I went to the boarding school. Clergy Orphan paid for me to go to boarding school, a really posh boarding school. And I was there for a year on the supervision order, and as soon as the year was up, I was kicked out. I shared a dormitory with Orlando Bloom, so it was a very posh boarding school. It was a very, very nice boarding school, and this is the thing with my life, is that I've been on this journey where I've been exposed to so many different environments, so many different people, so many different environments. And it's made me who I am. It's been my education has been that. And I think it's better than any education that I could have ever got.
So that...
I don't know if I answered the question then.
No, you absolutely did. So it's more, for me, I suppose, it's looking then at your experience that you've spoken about and how that changes your approach to care. So how has that personal journey influenced the culture that you've created and developed here at White Trees?
I think what I have tried to do on and off, and I think at White Trees we get it right sometimes and then we get it wrong sometimes, and that's part of a journey. And I think accepting that nothing is right and nothing is wrong, and sometimes it just is kind of really the underlying values that lets me be who I am. So I don't like a blame culture. I think it's a learn culture. I think that we can always move forward by learning, but if we start blaming, we don't learn. If we constantly try and prove ourselves to people, to Ofsted, to this, to that, we stop improving. And I think that for me, the biggest value that I think as a company, we try our best to empower people to do as well as they can do, and we try and individualise everything. And I think that is what when I look back at that little boy in that home that I first went to, I went to that home because that was the only home available. There was no needs assessment. There was no. I was picked up one morning after I'd been living I was living on a bit of wasteland. I got picked up. I went home, and my mum said, "Oh, stay there." And next thing you know, social services are there, and I'm being taken to their offices, and then I just got, it's the only bed available. Central Bristol, full of gang kids. I was an urchin. I definitely had a lot of problems, and I was doing drugs and I was doing all that sort of stuff, but I wasn't in gangs. I wasn't violent at that point. Maybe a bit to my mum, but there was a lot of underlying issues around that. I had emotional disturbance. I had a lot going on. I had a lot of trauma. I had a lot of all the things that were happening, but I didn't have anything to do with gangs. And I think, from us, we try and have, as best we can, this kind of vision of trying to do best by every single person and do what they need and not do what everyone thinks they need. If we try and learn who you are, then we can teach you how to look after yourself and become who you need to be, who you're going to be. And I think that process, and I wish, if somebody would have done that for me, and I always think whether it's staffing or whether it's a kid coming in, would I want to live there? I went to one of our homes the other day, Sherard's cottage, and if I was going to put one of my children in care, if I had to, they would go there. Amazing. I was trying not to swear then. Amazing. Like incredible, the love there. And I couldn't care less whether they've got what their Ofsted grade is. Literally could not care less. Those people, the children in that house, the adults in that house, there was so much love. And as soon as I walked in, I felt blessed to be there. And that's what matters. It doesn't matter what everybody says. And I was saying earlier to the guys, the first registration with the first house, I picked up the book to register and it said minimum standards. So I put it in the bin. I think that's the difference. It's not done by a textbook. As we've got bigger, we've had to be a bit more by textbook because there's a lot more to navigate, and that's been a lesson for me as well. But
That's really, really interesting, and I can only echo it's the first home that you took me to. It was Sherard's Cottage, and it is one of the most incredible environments that I've ever been in. I've been in many children's homes from a professional perspective. So just staying on topic with sort of your younger self, are there any lessons that from your younger self that you still carry with you as a leader today?
Lessons from a younger self. I think the lessons for me. Do you mean? So lessons
that you sort of took as in your younger years that you hold with you today as part of being a leader.
I think the biggest lesson I've probably ever learned in my entire life, which gives me the ability to lead people well, is forgiveness. That's probably the biggest thing that I ever learned, and I had to learn it young. My dad was a paedophile. He committed suicide. Being a paedophile actually wasn't what I had to forgive him for, strangely. It was actually the abandonment. He left me with my mum, and I didn't really know my mum very well. He was the biggest influence in my life. We did everything together. When he was gone, there was nothing. And so I had to forgive that, and then I had to forgive my mum for kicking me out of the house and abandoning me. And there's a whole lot of stuff going on there. So, forgiveness for me, if you don't forgive, it rots you, and it's just something that you carry. And I think people don't really realise what forgiveness means. I think that deep sense of forgiveness is very different from just saying I forgive you. You have to let go. And quite often people have said to me, "Oh, Simon, you must have trauma. You must have lots of issues." I have. But they don't define me and they don't cause me any issues at all. Purely because I've forgiven. And that for me was the gift that I think I gave myself that now has led to the organisation. And that's what I had, you know, it doesn't matter whether you've done something really bad and you've had to leave the organisation, or you've done something really, really good and you need to move on from the organisation to carry that on somewhere else. Or, you know, if one of the children, I've had children come to me and say, look, your homes are amazing, but I don't want to live here because this is not what I want. I don't want a family home. I don't want a therapeutic environment. I don't want this. I want to just live in a room and I want to get on with I don't want all this stuff. It's too much for me. And, you know, some people could be irritated by that. It doesn't offend, I don't get offended like by stuff like that, really. I don't get irritated by that. So I think for me, that is the biggest lesson that I could say, is to try and understand and think about how you can forgive yourself and then forgive other people for putting you in situations.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, so just staying on track around empathy, if we just hold on to that for a second, when you're a leader in the care sector, it takes a lot of empathy to succeed. What do you think are the most important qualities in a leader in this organisation? And what I'm thinking about is our deputies and our registered home managers. What do you think the best qualities are that we seek in those type of roles?
Kindness, forgiveness, trust. So I think trust in themselves and trust in others, trust in the processes, so trust in the systems that we've got as an organisation, trust to come to us if they've got problems. We have, it sounds a little bit old-fashioned, but an open door policy. You know, I don't even have a door, I don't have an office. So, you know, people have direct access to everyone. And I love that about our organisation. I was saying to the guys earlier, I don't even have an email. Everyone's got me on WhatsApp and then they can message me whenever they like, and I've created the groups, as you're aware. So I think for our kind of middle management and our senior management, the biggest real thing is that they soak it up like a sponge, and you take on and you see people for who they are, right? So would I be employable for our company now? Probably not. You know, I'm so all over the place and I'm so chaotic and I'm doing my own things, you know. Where would I fit now in this organisation? And I think, you know, when I was running shifts in London, I'd have some social work students turn up in the morning. I'd be like, yes. And everyone else would be like, oh God. And I'd be like, yes. They do all my paperwork all day. I didn't need them to manage the kids. I can manage 10 kids on my own. We're done, we're out. Can you stay back and do all the paperwork, please? And whilst you're there, can you just do me a bit of research on this, and can you do me a bit of that? And people buy into me. I know I've got that gift where people buy into me, but also I'm taking a massive piece of the pie. I'm taking I can take 90% of the workload. You need to, and I think that's where our middle management, when you look at people, when you look at shifts, when you look at organising yourself, you look at organising your time, you need to think that everyone is not you. They're not going to do it the same as you do it. And if you try to get them to do it the same as you do it, you're going to make them ill. And what you really will do is make them unemployable, because that is not who they are. So look at people as an individual. And I always tell our middle management, teach our staff the same as you would teach a young person. Train them like you would a young person, and look after them like you would a young person, because we're all the same inherently, aren't we? Because we've all got a child inside us. We've all got egos, we've all got this. I mean, you've got to try and drop the ego in this industry. You cannot have an ego. It gets found out straight away, and it's ugly. But if you treat people how you want to be treated, kindness and fairness, and then you look at them as an individual to what their skill set is. If their skill set is not paperwork, why are you going to make them a key worker straight away? They might be great at making relationships with the kids, but why are you going to give them a role that you know is going to cause them to have a lot of paperwork? Why would I make somebody who's amazing at looking after the kids on day 6 of employment, put them into a role where they're going to come unstuck straight away? You know, and then sometimes as well, if you make somebody who's a great leader, if you give them too much responsibility early and they're young into the organisation, they might not be young in personality, in person, but they might be young into the organisation. you might go, oh, they're amazing. And you give them that little bit too much too early and they start making bad decisions for the right reasons, all of a sudden they're not here anymore because they've been making bad decisions and everybody judges them on their bad decisions. Well, whose fault was that? Was that because the management gave them too much too early without enough knowledge? Or was that because they just made inherently bad decisions? And I think all of these different things I've learned over the years, and I think we need to give as managers, you need to give people that little bit of flexibility to say, right, what is your thing that you're really good at? Let's build that up to you, and then let's work slowly in the background on things that you're crap at. And I wish somebody would have done that for me. I did that for myself. So we work slowly on all of the little things. You know, I think you can't just every day go, you haven't done that, you haven't done that, you haven't done that. That's a boss, and that's horrendous. And I think as a manager, you need to be in a mindset of a leader. You don't need to be as creative as in leadership. You can follow processes. Some people, I hate being a middle manager. It's not for me. It makes me feel ill. Being a leader for some people is impossible because they couldn't take the responsibility of it. And people laugh and joke. I've had people say to me, "Si, you don't even work, do you? You're part-time, blah, 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 blah." Well, my day looks very different from most people's, but I have a lot of responsibility. And I carry it easy because it's natural to me. You know, I have a responsibility for all of these kids, I have a responsibility for all of these people and their families. So everyone that works for us, I've got a responsibility to their family. So, you know, we've got a responsibility to make sure they earn, to make sure they're looked after. Because if I don't look after them, and we don't look after them, then they don't look after their people, their tribes. So we're really in cahoots for looking after thousands of people today. That's on my shoulders all the time. I carry that well. I can go and have a coffee, I can have a laugh, I can talk to people, I can joke around, I can be a dick. I am inherently a dick, you know. I'm just a chill guy. And that's my persona, that's who I am. So, but a lot of people can't do that. No. They can't manage that. And it makes them something they're not.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. I think there's lots of people that really embody those leadership qualities in our registered home managers, and that's just a fantastic sort of quality that White Trees has established. The next thing I want to talk about is our new therapeutic offer. So White Trees Group is one of its offers is integrated therapeutic support within residential homes, and what I wanted to talk about is the big step for our organisation. So we already have a therapeutic offer, but this enhanced provision. So what I wanted to understand a bit from you today is about building better futures. Why now? Why is it the right time to do it now? And what makes it unique?
Well, I think we've got to the place where we can afford it, is the short answer for the why now. That is the short answer there. And I think every child in care, and it's the same if we talk about classroom, so people understand it in a classroom setting. When you're in a class of 30 kids and you've got 3 or 4 kids that are struggling quietly, they can get very overlooked. You've got 2 or 3 kids that are struggling very loudly, they get support. When children come into care, what people don't really see is they're kind of labelled, and the more tricky, the more diverse, the more challenges that child faces, the more support they get. The more higher the fee, the better the organisation, the different the organisation, the this, that and the other. I hate that. Every child that comes into care, whether you're in foster care, whether you're living with your auntie and uncle, whether you're living in a children's home, my belief is that every single children's home should have an element of a therapeutic offering. Now, a therapeutic offering doesn't just mean you go and have therapy. Therapy didn't work for me. Therapy made me worse because I had to go and talk about all of the shit that had already happened to me. And I didn't like that. That did not work for me. All of the stuff that happened to me that had to be dragged out of me during that process was not helpful to me at all. What helped me was a method of psychoeducational work. That's what helped me. So, you know, learning about me, understanding me. And I think that all of our children have a very different all have a different, completely unique biology. They have a completely different need for therapeutic care, and that's where our Building Brighter Futures model has come from. And I think now the evolution of that is that, I want to see every child looked after in the country with a model like that, with a framework. It doesn't have to be ours. It's irrelevant whether it's ours or not. I just want somebody else to do it. And they should have that as an offering. Everyone should have a good starting platform. And it shouldn't be that you come to our organisation and you have a better start than somebody else in another organisation. It should be across the board. As I said earlier, you pick up the minimum standards of children's homes. It's a minimum standards, You've got the skiff on top of that and you've got all of this, but they're kind of really just ticking boxes to say you got this done. And I think that we need to do more than that.
Absolutely. And I think for me, there's a bit of a takeaway from that. It's almost the 167-hour rule. So there's 168 hours in a week. If you go into that old-fashioned, we'll give you 1 hour of therapy in a room, sitting like this with a therapist. It's essentially peeing in the wind, because unless you've got that wraparound support for the other 167 hours, that 1 hour doesn't mean anything. I think that's what we're trying to do with this new therapeutic offer. It's that real wraparound support, treating every child as the individual that they are, meeting their different needs, whether that's social, emotional, behavioural or medical. And one of the things that we're looking to do is...
Or just a holiday.
Exactly that, open space, just to do something that's a bit normalising life. It doesn't always have to be in that clinical environment. But one of the things that we are looking at is moving into that clinical environment, aren't we?
Yes.
But particularly around behavioural lifestyles.
Yeah. Because I think that there's an underlying need, and we see children coming in to our organisation, other organisations that they could have biological needs, so they could have off their thyroid functions could be off. I think my thyroid function was off when I was a child. I had thyroid cancer 10 years ago, and they said that had probably been there since I was a child. I could never sleep. It was the biggest problem for me when I was in care. I never slept. I always called all my problems happened at night time. And you see it with the kids that we look after and people coming in, and you see it in the organisation with staff, with their families as well, is that, you've got these kids that are just slightly off kilter. And yes, they've had some trauma going on, but is there a biological issue there? Is there something actually going on with their blood work? Have they got a deficiency? They probably have got a deficiency, because diets are a massive thing. And that's the next step of the journey for us, is to try and understand. Like I said earlier, it's not about just understanding the brain. It's about understanding the body, understanding the person as a whole. And we're not scientists, we're care workers. I'm a care worker, I'm not a scientist, but we're going to bring those scientists in. We're going to bring the best people we can in at every step of the journey. When we've got enough resources, we will bring more people in that are better than we are, to understand our kids better than we do now, to help inform the future of their lives and build them bright futures, which is why the framework's called that.
Yeah, and some of that looks like nutritionists, it looks like building on that with dietitians, it looks like psychotherapists, it looks like access to private GPs, which is something that we're bringing on board at the moment.
I think a private GP is for me something that we were always going to... I never thought it would happen this quickly, but I think it's probably the most advantageous thing we can do. On every level, I think if you've got a child that's got a bit of health anxiety, that can spiral out of control so quickly. I know it from my own mental health. You get a lump and you think, oh no, I'm dying. When you're a kid and, you're off kilter anyway because of life's thrown a massive curveball at you, and then you've got these underlying things that are going on. Sometimes you just need an adult who knows, i.e. a doctor, your GP, to go, don't worry, mate, you're fine. It's okay. It's not a problem. It's just psoriasis. It's a little psoriasis lump. It's a little whatever, And I think having that on tap for us is going to be massively important. And for me, even if it, it's going to cost a hell of a lot of money, but even if it just helps one person, one kid in the whole time we're doing it, if we do it forever, then it's good enough.
Yeah, and I think there's always going to be some of the naysayers where GPs through primary care are free at the point of access through the NHS. But one of the things that we've seen exactly, which brings that wry smile, is that they aren't. So they might, the model might be there, but it doesn't work for the young people.
I think
support.
our organisation, probably, just at a guess, since we've started doing therapeutic work, which was 2010, I think we have probably paid for, not our own kids, I'm talking about children of families, so our teams, families, outside of the organisation, we have probably done 20 plus assessments for them for ADHD, autism and associated difficulties. We've commissioned them ourselves and paid for them because their children were waiting on the NHS for years and they couldn't get those assessments done, and it was causing pain and suffering to those individuals in our organisation. So that's what we did, and that's what we do. And I think that's the kind of biggest point that we've always tried to hide. I hate sort of saying how many people we help along the way, but we just do.
Yeah.
Because that's necessary. So to your point, GPs are letting them down, those kids. They're not getting referrals quick enough. The barriers to entry are too high for a lot of kids. And some GPs are amazing. I must say, my personal GP, very good. Everything has been very good. I've got Bupa. But Bupa's no good for our kids because in Bupa's like an insurance policy. So when you've got looked after children, it doesn't really cover everything. It won't cover their mental health. So there's kind of no point in having it. It's quite an expensive thing to have where you don't really get much covered. So that's why obviously we need to go down the route of employing GPs directly, whether we've got our own GP surgery, however that looks in the future. But they won't just be a GP. You've got the psychiatrists, the psychotherapists, the paediatricians, the mental health nurses, the counsellors, the doctors in nutrition, all of those wraparound services, because half of our children might not need it, but the other half might need all of them.
Absolutely.
You might only have 10% that need all of it, but the rest of them need some of it. But if you've got to have it there when they need it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to understand it, to know if they actually need it or not, because you don't even know what's there. And that's, I think, the biggest hurdle with barrier for everything is, and I think the biggest step with our clinical team is training around our staff team, and I think that's where we're going to go to next. I don't know if that was a question that was coming up, but I think the academy that we're trying to build in the background for growth and learning of our adults, simply on nutrition, a lot of people that don't even understand that nutrition is important, or what even good nutrition looks like.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So if I just jumping back slightly, I just want to pick up on a point around motivation and team culture. So we know that the team here at Whitetrees, in the broadest sense, the work that they do is demanding, sort of emotionally and mentally. How do you keep that team motivated and connected to that shared purpose that you've spoken about?
I think it's a lot of that falls onto the team itself. I think that coming into team meetings with energy, having a registered manager, having really good supervisions, and knowing that they've got a resource here. It comes back to our training and the training that's offered. And it comes back to the clinical team and the offering that we have there, so that they know they're not this standalone, they're not on their own, they've got this organisation that's with them and we're all together as one. And I think, motivation isn't really a thing. I think it's really dedication and discipline. And I think we have a lot of very dedicated people, we have a lot of very disciplined people. And I think that going through the hard times, motivation fades. In good times, you make hay, and that's what people do. And I think that in our organisation, I think keeping people going through it is just showing them love, showing them kindness, and always showing empathy to people, no matter what the situation's happened. If somebody's struggling, we'll try and look after them. If somebody's in need, we'll try and support them. Whether that's personally, whether it's professionally, as a team, we're constantly trying new ideas and new strategies, and we're growing so that we can add more resource in. And that's what it's about. It's about resources and diversity of resources. So if they're struggling with a particular behaviour or they're struggling with a particular theme, hopefully in the future we'll have more resources to be able to tackle that head on straight away.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that they work in and live in an organisation that is more like a community than a workplace is hopefully underpins everything that we do, and that's what we're trying to. And I don't know if we always get it right, but we want to be a community. That's what we would try and encapsulise, is this sense of community, this sense of belonging. And I think hopefully
it's that impact, isn't it, and the successes of a consequence.
Yeah.
That you're talking about. So just on that, just on sort of impact, when you think about the young people that you've supported, are there any sort of stories or little moments that stand out for you as sort of as reminders of why you do this?
Oh, so many. So many. So, I mean, me and Emma now have got probably about 27 kids that we are in constant. They're in their 30s now, and you know, they talk to us weekly, some daily. You know, they've got families, they've got their own kids. They're kids that we looked after in our first homes. You know, when Thornbury House opened, I pretty much lived there. Emma and Lucy used to come over every day just to see me, so I could see Luce. You know, right up until we opened Sherrard's, which was our third home, we were still pretty much doing the same. And a lot of the kids knew us. If there was behaviours at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd go in. That is my bag. That is what I do well. And because of that, I built really strong relationships with those kids, because I do believe that is what we should be doing. Everything is about relationships. I'm not talking about having blurred boundaries, and I'm an adult, you're a child, so there is a boundary. There's a simple boundary there that is there because life puts that boundary there. So I think that having all of these success stories, if you want to call them that, but I don't think I would call them that, but just to kind of put it out there in a simple manner, these children that have grown up to be adults that are functioning well with their lives, you know, and sometimes struggling, the same as we all do. For me, that's why we do it.
Yeah.
I love it when I get a phone call on a Sunday morning from one of the managers saying, I found a real bargain holiday for all the kids to go to Greece or something that happened in the summer. I'm really sorry to call you on a Sunday, but you know, we need the money put on our card. I mean, that just makes me like, that is what we do it for. Like, you know, so, and you know, some people that would probably annoy them, but for me, that, you know, our kids doing stuff and being places, and they do a lot of stuff, you know that now, being in here, I mean, they do a lot of stuff. You know, I think, you know, you think about an everyday household and what an everyday household looks like in costs. That's why it costs so much for kids to be in care. Because, you know, everyone talks about the cost. The cost is a big thing at the minute, you know, cost of care. I saw this lady talking the other day and saying, you know, children shouldn't live in private organisations, they should only live in council-run homes. I know I'm going off piece now, but I was thinking, you know, there's probably no council-run homes. There might be a few, but I don't think I know any or I've heard of any that are giving all the opportunities that we give. We put all of the money back into the kids and what they do. They're doing stuff that is incredible, absolutely amazing. You know, every single home of ours went abroad this year on holiday. You know, for me, that melts my heart. That's why we do it.
That is success, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's success. It's beyond the stats. I know you're a person that likes the statistics. You like the performance data of how well things are performing, from homes to schools to sort of the head office. But that is what success looks like, isn't it?
Yeah, feels like. Yeah, you can feel success. You know, I remember going to see one of the girls in school when the school first opened. She asked me if I'd go and see her work because she had no one else to go and see her work. So I went to see her work, and she was showing me all these. She did a project in London, and one of the buildings that she was taking a picture of was the Ritz. And I was like, "Have you ever been there?" She was like, oh, I couldn't go in there, we don't deserve to go in there. So we took her. I mean, I would never want to go there. It's not something I would enjoy. I'm a McDonald's guy, but the fact that she felt that she couldn't made me feel like she should. And that is the thing that we try and encapsulate. That's how we build brighter futures. That no therapy will work unless you have that, because that is going to give her, and it has done. She's nearly 30 now, and I saw her recently, and she's doing exceptionally well. And she needed purpose. You know, she needs to know that these people are the same as you. You know, when I first got together with Emma, I didn't think I could go into a fancy restaurant. I've been to loads of pubs and all that sort of stuff, but I didn't even feel comfortable in a coffee shop. And I think that for our kids, you know, there's no barriers. Let's take those barriers down.
I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we zoom out for a second and take things up a sort of a notch, and think about the future of care, what changes would you love to see across the wider care and education sector? And I suppose for me, really critically to that, how is Whitetrees contributing to that shift?
So I think you've got to separate care and education a little bit. And then I think in the children's home sector, I think it's like going back to what I said a minute ago. It's actually looking at an approach where the child is looked at as an individual, and everyone says that, but they're not really, because every child has different opportunities because they're put in different environments and they're different. And I think so. When you talk about Ofsted, and I had this conversation with an Ofsted inspector Wednesday morning, so 2 days ago. We have lots of different adults coming in and assessing what we do. So we have Ofsted coming in, and we get one inspector one week, one inspector the next week, different inspector the next week. The consistency is not there. They're not allowed to give advice. They're not allowed to share good knowledge that they've seen across the country. So they go into our home today, they can't go and share that with another home tomorrow. I kind of understand why that is, but if we had a place where and this is just an example, right? So I didn't know the question was coming, but just an example. Every 10 homes we open, so we've got 4 kids, let's say 40 children. So every 40 children in care, whether that's the 40 homes with 1 child in each, or whether that's, 10 homes with 4 children in, just say every 40 children as a model, you had a social worker that worked alongside you with government, right? Kids still have their own social workers, but we have a social worker as well. And then you did the same with the Ofsted. So you have an Ofsted inspector that comes to you for a year, like a secondment. They're working with your organisation to support your organisation. And then you have somebody from the youth justice system, if you're looking after kids that are in that system. And then, so you have a collection of people from outside your organisation helping you on a board to care for the kids in the homes. And I think if you had that multidisciplinary kind of outlook on it, combined with, and I suppose this is the biggest bit, probably where I should have started, I think the age of the child really matters. And I think that I don't like the idea of children coming into residential care too young, but if a child came to us when their care journey first started, let's just say 5 years old, and we assess their needs in a lovely therapeutic environment, whether it's for a few weeks or a few months, and with trained professionals and the body that I just said behind the scenes, highly skilled professionals, to assess where that child would go, would they have a better outcome later on down the line? And I think the answer is yes. And that's because people that don't really know the industry, we worked with kids. I had one girl that I picked up and she was living in a shed, and she'd moved for 34, it was either 34 or 36 foster placements in 2.5 years. Oh, wow. And she was living in a shed. she came to us and and we're still in contact now. She's a lovely girl, lady. She's got 2 kids of her own. She's doing amazing. Her kids are still with her. They're older as well. So she's done incredibly well. She was with us for about 18 months at the end of her care journey. She needed to be treated like an adult by the time she came to us because she'd been an adult. She'd been running a little bit like me, running away all the time and spending a lot of time outside the home. So she needed to be treated differently from a child who was just coming into care and needed different boundaries, and everyone needs different. So I think from that point of view, if we'd have got that young girl when she was earlier, because some children, foster care is not right for them. For some children, residential care is not right for them. For some children, adoption's not right for them. And I think that, who makes that judgment at the minute? Who makes that judgment? What professionals do that? And, is it somebody that actually knows the child? Have they lived with the child for a period of time? If they haven't lived with the child for a period of time, how are they making those assessments? So if you've got a child that moves in with you, lives with you, and I know it sounds, like you just want to get them into a foster family as quickly as possible, but if you get them into that foster family at 5 and then they go into that foster system and they'll be fine until they get big, 8 or 9 or 10, that's when they start causing problems, when they're smashing windows and stabbing people and all that sort of stuff. If they've got an underlying condition, they've got an underlying assessment need that's not been picked up because people don't know them. The professionals might be the most skilled professionals in the world. They're not living in the house with them. They're not seeing them every second of every day. How are they making those underlying presumptions? I think there's a lot of social care, a lot of people in social care make underlying assumptions about the needs of young people based on hearsay, based on what people talk about. And I don't think that's right. I think if we did that, it would save the government billions and billions and billions. Because I've paid back my care experience in tax tenfold.
But imagine with that team around the child, what you would be able to do.
That'd be incredible. Yeah. Just that little bit of insight, just that few months of, right, I'm not going to put you straight into a foster family to save money. I'm not sure I should say that it's to save money, but I do believe that that could be the main purpose behind it. Maybe it's drummed up as we need them in a family as quickly as possible. But families are families. Families aren't made up of doctors and nurses and professionals, and their idea of behaviours are different, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think it'd be wrong of anyone to think that cost doesn't come into things. It might be worded slightly differently from a local authority perspective, that it's ensuring that they get value for money out of a placement and that it's in the best interest of the young person. But there is a financial aspect to it. Local authorities have got finite budgets that they have to balance year in, year out. Yeah. And we're acutely aware of that as we sort of go on this journey around introducing a new therapeutic model. But you can't get away from that.
No. And it would be nice for the local authorities to look at a child in care. I would end on this. If they looked at a child in care for the length of their care journey and they said, right, actually, if we spend money on them now, they're going to cost us less in the future. And when I'm talking about their care journey, I'm not talking up to 16 when they move them into semi-independence. That happens all the time. We often look after children with no fee, no cost, because of that. If you look at their journey until they're 26 or until they're 49, my age, how can we get them to a place where they have a good longevity in life? And then, the government could wrap it up and say, well, how much are they going to pay back into the system if we get them out of the system? Because if they stay in the system their whole life, they're going to keep costing, right? Yeah, and often that happens. Yeah. It's actually not rocket science.
So what kind of legacy do you hope Whitetrees and you as part of that Whitetrees family hope to have?
Made a difference. That is very simple. Made a difference. If we can make a difference to somebody's life, then we're happy. And I think that is very, very simple. I'd love to be able to say that we could help evoke change in the system. That would be amazing. I would love to do that. I'd love to be listened to by people that have the ability to potentially change things in the future leaders. Maybe that's something we'll do down the line, but I think there's a lot of scope for the company. I don't want the company to be here in 20 years' time. I want it to be here in 100 years' time. I want it to surpass me. I think on my gravestone, if you want to be a little bit more solemn about it, I've been asked this before, all I want on my gravestone is he never gave up. My mum used to say I'm one of life's triers, and she meant that in a negative way. But for me, that's a positive. Just never gave up.
So the young...
On anything or anyone. Simple.
It's a remarkable journey, and I look at it, and just from today's sort of back and forth, the young Simon wanted to make a difference to himself and get him into a better place, and that transference is your idea of success, and the legacy you want to make is a difference for the people that we support. I think it's fantastic. It's been great going through some questions with you today, and really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.